Have you ever looked at a company's financial report and just thought, can I actually trust these numbers?
It's a really common feeling, actually, and it hits right at the heart of how markets are supposed to work.
Exactly. And today, we're diving into, well, a pretty specific puzzle in the Korean insurance world. See, they had this huge accounting overhaul, IFRS17, meant to bring global standards.
Yeah.
But a year later, people are still questioning if the financial statements are reliable.
Yeah, it's quite the situation. Still lots of uncertainty swirling around.
So that's our mission for this deep dive. Try to untangle these complex accounting principles in Korea's insurance sector. We want to figure out why there's this lingering distrust in the numbers they publish. And we've got a great source to help us. An article from back in October 2024 is called IFRS17 Vorol Kajam.
Right, that's by Park Yu-seo. He's got quite the background, adjunct professor, CPA, and an actuary, so he knows the angles.
Definitely. Now, you might be listening and thinking, okay, October 2024, but it's July 2025 now. Is this piece still relevant?
That's a totally fair point to raise, and the answer is absolutely yes. While, yeah, it was written almost a year ago, the core insights, they aren't just about yesterday's news. They really get to the fundamental, persistent issues in the Korean insurance industry that we're still seeing today. The problems he flagged, well, they haven't just vanished.
Okay, good. So let's unpack it then. Because the author, Professor Park, makes a pretty bold claim right off the bat.
Yeah.
He argues this deep distrust isn't just some small thing, it's structural. He calls it a decades-long misconception about GAAP and SAP. What does he mean by that?
Right. Well, to really get it, you first need to know what GAAP and SAP even are. GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles, which for Korean insurers now means IFRS17. That's for the public. Investors, the market, external folks. It's about transparency, letting people make informed decisions.
Okay, the public face.
Exactly. Then you have SAP statutory accounting principles. That's totally different. It's for the regulators, the supervisors. Its main job is checking solvency, making sure the company meets regulatory capital requirements, that sort of thing. So different purpose.
Completely different. And here's the crucial accounting principle that somehow got lost. If the purpose is different, the accounting treatment has to be different. You can't just, smash them together.
Like trying to use a hammer as a screwdriver.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It just fundamentally doesn't work.
But the author says this basic idea was ignored. So how did that misconception actually play out? And what's this about a de facto unification? Sounds a bit dodgy.
Well, yeah, it kind of was. Before IFRS 17 officially came in, insurance companies often said they were following international standards for their public reports. But in reality, they were mostly just using SAP rules for pretty much everything, even the reports going out to investors.
Seriously. And the auditors.
That's the other part. The article points out that accounting firms, for the most part, didn't really challenge this properly. They didn't flag it strongly enough. The industry even used that term, de facto unification, sort of implying SAP was basically GAAP for them.
But Professor Park is clear. That was clearly a wrong perception. It meant GAAP principles just weren't being applied correctly for external reporting. And this went on for decades, undermining trust in those public financial statements, the very ones people rely on.
Okay, so then IFRS 17 arrives. Global standard, big changes expected. You'd think the market, the regulators, everyone would be hoping, finally, this will fix it.
That was definitely the hope. A clean slate, alignment, transparency.
So what actually happened? Did the trust magically reappear?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting and frankly a bit disappointing. Here we are a year after they adopted IFRS 17, and you still see headlines, market commentary expressing distrust.
Still.
Yeah.
After all that effort.
Yeah, and if you actually try to analyze the public financial data from the past year, it's apparently really hard to draw solid conclusions, which kind of suggests these expensive new statements aren't giving external users the clear, useful information they need.
So you spend all this time, enormous internal resources, as the article says, plus massive audit fees.
We're talking hundreds of millions to billions of won annually in audit fees mentioned in the article. Huge sums.
For statements the market still doesn't fully trust. That's quite something.
It really makes you question the value proposition of those public reports right now.
And now, with this ongoing distrust, some people are apparently suggesting, okay, maybe we need accounting dualization. Which sounds logical on the surface, but I'm guessing the author disagrees.
Oh, strongly. He calls that idea absurd.
Why absurd?
Because Korean insurance accounting was already supposed to be dualized. Since the late 90s, after the IMF crisis, there was already GAAP for public reports and SAP for regulators.
So the framework was there.
Exactly. The problem wasn't the lack of a dual system. The problem was that the GAAP side, the public reporting side, wasn't being done properly. They should have been using GAAP all along for those external statements.
Before IFRS 17 and after it.
Correct. That fundamental principle hasn't changed. So calling for dualization now completely misses the real issue. The issue was the failure to follow the existing GAAP requirements for public disclosure.
It's like saying you need a new rule book when the problem was people weren't following the old one.
Precisely. It distracts from the core failure.
Okay, so if it wasn't about needing dualization, what was the deeper flaw? What did the industry, the accounting firms, maybe even academics get wrong when they were gearing up for IFRS 17?
The common thinking apparently was that they could just sort of patch things up, take their existing SAP framework, and just add some IFRS 17 bits on top. The idea was maybe this would be easier, less disruptive practically.
A shortcut, essentially.
Kind of, but the author argues this approach inevitably caused many other problems. It was fundamentally flawed.
How so?
Well, think about other industries. If a regular company needs financial statements for investors and different ones for tax purposes, or maybe they operate in different countries with different rules.
So they just prepare separate sets of books, right? Maybe with some adjustments?
Exactly. They prepare separate statements because the purpose or the standard is different, and usually it's manageable. But for insurance, with its super complex long-term products, trying to basically force SAP and GAAP together, making adjustments here and there, the author says that's tantamount to declaring they won't properly handle accounting.
It's too complex to just paper over the differences.
Way too complex. It signals a lack of commitment to getting the accounting right for its intended purpose.
Now, pulling this together, what's the big picture takeaway? What crucial goal got lost in translation during this IFRS 17 implementation?
The absolute core principle, the main objective of using IFRS 17 for those public financial statements, should have been about faithfully representing substance.
Substance, meaning the economic reality.
Yes. What's really going on financially in the company? Not just ticking boxes or tweaking existing numbers. It's about showing the true financial health and performance. And the author's take is that the insurance industry just seems to have lost sight of this most important goal somewhere along the way with IFRS 17.
Which leads to this bizarre situation you mentioned earlier.
Right, this really odd situation where the official auditors, the accounting and actuarial firms, they look at the IFRS 17 statements and issue appropriate opinions. They sign off.
Give you the green light.
But then the market, the media, the actual users of these statements, they're looking at the same information and saying, nope, we still don't trust this.
Well, that puts regulators in a tough spot, doesn't it?
Absolutely. What do you do when the gatekeepers say it's okay, but the market reception is deeply skeptical? It's a major challenge.
So given this whole mess, this history, what does Professor Park suggest is the way forward? It doesn't sound like an easy fix.
No, definitely not. His recommendation is quite blunt, actually. He says the industry needs to, even now, a year into IFRS 17, thoroughly reflect on these past mistakes, these wrong ways of thinking. They need to really understand what's going on, share that understanding internally, and basically apologize to the market.
Wow, apologize.
Yes. And then find the right path now. He explicitly calls this process true courage, owning the problem and genuinely changing course.
That takes guts, especially for an entire industry.
It certainly does. And he adds that regulators have a role here too. They should actively support the companies that do show this kind of courage, because that's what will ultimately help the market develop and rebuild that lost trust.
Makes sense. Support the ones trying to do it right.
And there's a final, pretty stark warning in the article. The author says, wrong accounting figures can never lead a company correctly in the long term. Insurers have got to stop reaching for these temporary fixes whenever interest rates shift or regulations change, just trying to avoid unfavorable results on paper.
Address the underlying issues instead of masking them.
Exactly. And he expresses this real regret, saying that despite everything learned from the IMF crisis and other financial shocks, it seems like fundamentally not enough has changed in the insurance industry's approach.
What a journey. So we've really dug into this fascinating and clearly very complex issue. It seems the reliability problems in Korean insurance financials aren't just about adopting a new standard like IFRS 17. It goes much deeper.
Yeah, it's rooted in this decades-old misunderstanding or perhaps misapplication of basic accounting principles, GAAP versus SAP, and losing focus on that critical goal representing economic substance.
It really underscores how vital it is to keep accounting purposes separate and clear.
Absolutely. And it highlights the sheer difficulty, the true courage needed to tackle these deeply ingrained practices, even when new rules and huge investments are involved.
It definitely leaves you thinking, doesn't it? You have to wonder, what kinds of hidden truths or similar struggles might be happening in other industries when it comes to their financial reporting? And what would it actually take for that true courage to show up elsewhere and force genuine change? Something to chew on.
Definitely food for thought. And just our standard reminder here, this deep dive offers general insights into the Korean insurance industry based on the source material. But please remember, any investment decisions or other financial actions you might consider, those are entirely your responsibility. Always, always consult with a qualified professional expert before making specific financial choices.
Sound advice. Thanks for breaking that down.
My pleasure. It's a critical topic.